The Fall of the Roman Republic, Part 1. After the Punic Wars, there were consequences of expansion. With the fall of Carthage and Corinth, the Roman Republic had become the biggest superpower in the Mediterranean. However, this created major problems with citizens, because they were growing poorer whilst the nobility became richer. A major problem that arose was land crisis by the Roman military system. Soldiers who fought against Carthage and against other Greek states were primarily made of citizens. Romans couldn't become soldiers without owning land, so most owned a small farm. The soldiers were away at war for long periods. Their families were unable to take care of their crops or pay debts, having to sell their lands to nobles. And once they returned home, war veterans had to find work in Rome, and began to band together to force the Senate to help them. Nobles who controlled the Senate profited from selling farmlands and didn't want to surrender their power to the poor. A group of patricians called the Equites created plantations called the latifundia, where rather than hiring unemployed Romans to work the lands, they purchased foreign slaves and profited off of cheap slave labor. The Equites tried to prevent landless Romans from interfering in their financial monopoly, which created a division between the poor and rich. Fewer landowners basically meant fewer men available for soldiers. The Gracchi brothers. The first Gracchi brother was Tiberius Gracchus, who held plebeian tribune in 133, but was killed in the same year as members of the Senate murdered him because of his political reform. This actually objectified the protection called syncosanctity that was given to plebeian tribunes. Tiberius drafted a law called the Lex Sapronia Argaria that proposed the Senate give Italian land to war veterans. This solved the problem of recruitment of men for the military. After his death, Gaius Gracchus, his younger brother, also held plebeian tribune and was killed for the same reasons in 121. His reforms were modifying the land distribution law that his brother instituted, and also proposed that a new city be built in Carthaginian ruins. Gaius Gracchus also implemented the grain dole, which meant grain shipments every month as guaranteed food for the citizens. As a result of the Gracchi tribuneships, the Roman senators were divided into two factions: the Optimates, Latin for best men, and the Populares, Latin for the people. Each faction had different ideas about political power in Rome. After the death of the Gracchi, a young Roman named Gaius Marius started his political career. He supported the Optimates faction. He needed men to fight in the army, so he created military reforms, where he asked volunteers to become his soldiers, regardless of financial position, meaning even the poorest of Romans could join his army. Marius created a new idea for Rome that meant serving in the military could become a full-time career. Although there became consequences to this reform as men started becoming loyal to their generals rather than the Republic itself. In the Jugurthine War in 119, there was a war in Numidia, where Lucius Cornelius Sulla brought the situation to an end, although Marius took claim of this victory himself, beginning tension between the two officers. Marius also went to war with Germanic tribes because of an outcry of people, and became consul for the second time in 104. He tried to give land to those who helped him fight the Germanic tribes, but the Senate refused. He tried to consult the plebeian council, but was criticized in the voting assemblies for having poor people to fight for him. After failing to meet his land promises, Marius left Rome for 2 years, although he returned in the Social War of 91, as Rome and its allied cities exploded into war, and called Marius to lead an army to defend Rome. In the Social War, Cornelius Sulla also led his own army. He was given a campaign to declare war in the Asia Minor on the king Mithridates, a war that could guarantee him glory and wealth. Jealous of the campaign, Marius used violence and plebeian tribunes to get the campaign assigned to himself. Sulla was angered by this, as his great efforts were diminished as Marius used unfair political means to obtain a mission. So in 88, there was the civil war where Sulla marched on Rome. He recruited his own volunteer army and planned to force the Senate to take back his role in the Mithridatic campaign. The Roman soldiers were so inspired by Sulla's speech that they swore their loyalty. Marius and the Senate showed no resistance, and Sulla got his campaign back. Sulla outlawed all men who worked against him, and Marius fled to northern Africa. As Sulla was away in the Asia Minor, Marius returned from Africa and won consulship for the 7th time. The Populari faction took over the Senate and deemed Sulla as a public enemy. After declaring peace with Mithridates, Sulla came back and once again marched on Rome for the 2nd time in 83. Marius died after becoming consul for the 7th time and handed leadership to his son, who was also called Marius. Sulla's soldiers defeated the Roman soldiers, and Marius fled. Sulla also pursued the Senate at his final confrontation at the Colline Gate and came out as a clear victor. Sulla got the nickname Felix, meaning lucky. His reforms were creating prescriptions, as he was uncertain of Roman senators. Prescriptions were a list of people's names that were displayed. These people could be legally hunted and killed, and 500 people were murdered because of this. His other reforms were called the Sullan Restoration Program, which reinforced the curses on Rome. He even killed a young noble named Lucretius who didn't obey him and persisted to run for office. Sulla also minimized the powers of the plebeian tribunes and cancelled the grain dole because tribunes could use it to their own advantage to gain the people's support. After Sulla's death, Pompey the Great arose. Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus served in the Social War and also helped Sulla by using money to raise an army when he marched on Rome. It was actually Sulla who deemed him as the Great. In the Lepidan Revolt in 78, he prevented the consul Marcus Aemilius from marching on Rome with the rebels from Etruria. As Pompey was in Spain, wealthy Roman Marcius Licinius Crassus rose to power and served Rome in the Third Servile War, also known as the Spartacus Slave Revolt. Thracian slave Spartacus led 70 gladiator slaves to an armed rebellion. He gathered 70,000 slaves in this revolt, and in a series of battles, Crassus defeated most of them, the last 500 meeting Pompey as he was returning from Spain, who diminished the remainder of rebels. Both Crassus and Pompey were elected as consul in the year 70 BCE and restored the plebeian tribunes taken away by Sulla. Other conflicts that included these two were the pirate problem in the same year as their consulship, where pirates captured cities in the Mediterranean and hijacked Roman grain shipments at sea. Bill, in 67, called the Lex Gabinia, gave Pompey a 3-year command in the Mediterranean, and with the largest naval fleet ever built, defeated the pirates, giving him praise and respect. Finally, after the pirates, Pompey was given the Lex Minuia to deal with King Mithridates, who grew in power after the peace with Sulla in 85. Mithridates tried to conquer the Asia Minor, eventually dying, leaving Pompey to secure new lands, taking Palestine, Syria, and Judea. The fall of the Republic in this section can be summarized by the use of plebeian tribunes, by the land crisis to gain the people's support, volunteer soldiers and their loyalty to their generals, and opposing powers within the Senate and seizing control of consular and military campaigns.